the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. In the beginning, excuse me. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. The unfolding of this gospel story is to me like a gentle dawn, one that edges and seeps above the horizon to illuminate clouds of darkness and to brighten them with striations of light and new possibilities. The clouds in the sky of this story are heavy with social and religious and personal content. But Jesus is the light of the world, and he illuminates them all. He is determined to fill his days with the works of the one who sent him for as long as he can. In today's reading, when the disciples and Jesus pass by, they happen upon a man born blind, and they talk about him. The disciples want to know if his blindness was caused by sin, his or his parents. I wonder how many times the man born blind had to endure that question. As a blind beggar, he lived in the margins as an outcast who was barely seen and rarely acknowledged. But Jesus' quick reply must have brought hope. Neither sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. And so, with mud and spittle and the waters of the pool of Siloam, the man born blind becomes the man who was healed. And then we see, with surprise, that the light generated by this miraculous healing reveals deep shadows. Rather than being restored to community life after gaining his sight, the healed man finds himself further marginalized. Indeed, the climate of fear that declares some people unclean is so entrenched that no one celebrates with him the wonder of new sight. Everyone who should support him or cheer him on turns away. His neighbors don't recognize him, his parents distance themselves, and his religious community interrogates and chastises him because they are threatened by the thought that his healing might draw more followers to Jesus. Yet the man's rejection actually catalyzes further healing, as can be heard during his second round of testimony with religious leaders. He finds his voice. He has already described his experience of healing in the simplest terms possible. I was blind, but now I see. But he refuses to speculate on Jesus' sinfulness, and having already told the leaders all he knows, he refuses to repeat himself. And then, in spite of being a nobody, this man from the streets dares to question his interrogators and speak in defense of Jesus. He argues, we know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. But with that, the man who was healed is driven out. And as he exits his roller coaster experience of sight restored, relationships spurned, religion debated, dignity denied, and connections severed, Jesus comes to him again. Finding him alone, Jesus reveals to him that he is the Son of Man, and the healed man is moved to believe in him and worship him. So thus we see that the light of the world can turn the darkness of blindness and the darkness of the world's rejection into light. This story has a lot to say about blindness, both literal and metaphorical, and about the ways in which light enters our lives. When I first looked at this text, I thought, whoa, we are all blind from birth in one way or another, metaphorically speaking. What was in my mind was how strongly we're influenced by the experiences that form us, our families, communities, race, economics, opportunities, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how sometimes our experiences create barriers that make us blind to understanding the experiences of others, or even fully grasping the context of our own experience. We live in the shadow and light of our ancestors, as anyone who watches Finding Your Roots can attest. In that program, researchers often find a thread between generations that suggests certain qualities may be inherited, or that the effects of traumatic histories and fierce struggles are passed on to progeny. We are living in a time when many of us are having our eyes opened on culturally challenging fronts. The work on land acknowledgement is a good case in point. Blindness plays out on many platforms, including those that make the news, as we try to weigh the needs of our neighbors with our own. There's truth in the phrase, "You don't know what you don't know." But such a phrase is always an invitation to humility and should never be the end of the story. Among the many reasons I'm glad to be an Episcopalian is the effort our church makes to help us know what we would otherwise not know. I've taken the Sacred Ground class offered by the church only once, but as I've mentioned before, it stands out to me as a shining example of bringing light to entrenched racial and cultural blindness that affects people from highly diverse backgrounds. The church at every level has been shamefully blind at times, but shining light into those shadows elicits change and hope. If there's any message to be taken from the long, long, long Gospels of these past 2 Sundays, it's that we can all be people of light, bearers of the light of Christ, and beacons of his message of love. Indeed, healing unjust systems and institutions begins with individual enlightenment that then spreads like the dawn to a world awaiting daylight. Jesus gave the Samaritan woman dignity and purpose by asking her for a drink of water, and she in turn became his evangelist. Jesus gave the man born blind his sight and a new way of life, and he in turn became Jesus' spokesman and defender. All of us have ways to bring light to the lives of others, and it usually begins with seeing a need, peering into shadows, and searching within ourselves. All week, whenever I've closed my eyes in meditation or prayer, I've thought with a little irony about my need for doing that, my need to dim the world so that the other light can show up. We cannot solve all the problems, all the blindness in the world, but we are called by Jesus to let his light shine through us, and whenever we can, wherever we can, with whomever we can, share his light. Amen.